And now we're joined from Washington, D.C. by the AG1 correspondent Nick Harper. Nick, thank you so much for being with us today. So do you see President Trump's threat regarding the Strait of Hormuz being open for all but Iranian ships being effectively and getting implemented by the US forces?
Yeah, it seems very difficult, Tom, exactly how they will be implementing all of this. But really, we're back to square one. Again, back to this idea of a blockade on all Iranian ships, preventing them from entering or leaving any of the ports. But also the US seems to be extending this to a further extent, saying that this will also be covering any ships carrying anything to do with Iranian cargo. So therefore, not just Iran-flagged ships, but potentially any other ship from any other country that is trying to either facilitate the movement of cargo that originates from Iran or trying to move cargo into Iran itself. It is something that the US military was doing before until they lifted the blockade, and now it looks as if it will be back on. That blockade due to start at 4 p.m. Washington time. That's just under 3.5 hours from now. And in theory, at that point, once again, the US military in the region will be responsible for really trying to scale back the movement of ships entering and exiting Iran.
And Nick, Trump's dropped the 20% toll idea in favour of trade and investment deals with Gulf states. Do we know if that's been negotiated with any specific countries?
Well, no, we are waiting for specifics, quite simply. Donald Trump spoke about it during that impromptu press conference with the Iraqi Prime Minister. In that, he said that there would be oil partnerships that have been suddenly formed, and they would probably be announced either this week or next week. He didn't even make it clear during that discussion that there was an actual deal that had been agreed by Iraq, even though he did hint at it. So really we're waiting for the specifics. Donald Trump, though, promising that this will be massive in his words, that it'll be good news for the United States, obviously trade partnerships, potentially oil partnerships as well, between the US and the Gulf nations, but he's also saying that it will be beneficial for those Gulf nations as well. Not exactly making it clear how it will benefit them. Of course, if they were to invest, say, in US industry here in the United States, build a factory, create jobs, there would be some residual benefits for that country, but it does seem heavily weighted in the favour of the United States at this stage. Donald Trump saying that those investments would be massive, saying that there would be trade investment deals with Gulf states in the region, and that there would be the potential for wealth on both sides. But really at this stage, not exactly clear what deals have been agreed to or when we may get the specific details on them.
And Nick, does CENTCOM or the Pentagon have a clear plan, on how the US ships will actually distinguish and intercept the Iranian-linked cargo in real time? Or are we still waiting on operational details from Washington?
We are, and we might not get them, Tom, because that's the type of operational detail that normally the Pentagon would prefer to keep private, secret, not disclosing it to the public. But you're right, they will need to have some sort of mechanism to work out how to find which ships are allowed to pass through unimpeded and which ships the US blockade will be intercepting, stopping and turning around. In terms of the actual plans themselves, Donald Trump made further comments about the dropping of that 20% toll plan, really suggesting, without quite saying so, that he had had plenty of people in his ear saying that it was a silly idea, that it was an idea that was not going to be workable or enforceable. It was an idea that he floated just 24 hours ago, but already rolling back on this idea that the US should get 20% of any revenue achieved from any ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, the US administration, let's remember, has been very much against the Iranians imposing a similar toll on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. The US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, even went as far to suggest a couple of months ago that it would be in violation of international law. But here we had the US president suggesting a similar plan. In his words, a reimbursement plan. That has now been dropped, but he still plans to have that blockade in place. But as you mentioned, it will be somewhat difficult to not just enforce it, but in the first stage, distinguish between Iranian linked ships and those who can pass through without being stopped by the US military.
And Nick, are you hearing anything from your sources on whether Washington is planning further military action, or is there any indication of a pushback towards negotiations?
Well, in terms of more military action, it seems as if there could be another night, a fourth night in the coming hours. We've had 3 consecutive nights of US attacks on Iran. Certainly nothing confirmed at this stage, but there is a feeling in Washington that really the momentum is on the US side, that they might look to strike further targets in Iran on a fourth night. Now, normally those strikes would take place in the evening or in the night Iranian time. That normally lands in the middle to late afternoon US time. So that blockade due to be enforced from about 4 p.m. Washington time. Strikes would potentially happen shortly after that. They're normally in that 4 to 5 p.m. hour. Not clear if they will take place, but of course there is concern that what we are now seeing is the US signalling that they are ready to be dragged back into this conflict. 3 nights in a row there have been those strikes against Iran, a huge fear that really we could see not just a return to the conflict, but a long-term potential conflict in which the United States clearly has no exit strategy. It's tried to have negotiations. Those have now fallen apart or in complete tatters. So what happens next? Is the US going to continue with those strikes, or will it find some sort of off-ramp? At this stage, it's not clear. And in those latest comments from the US president, there was clearly no suggestion that he was ready to step back from the brink, to stop the military action and somehow restart talks with the Iranians.
Nick, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it lots.